So I've come to the little town near where I'm renting for some live music. Have a look. And there's this little boy, and he's gotten on the stage, and he's walked up the stairs, and his dad is now taking him behind this like old train car. And I'm thinking about this next interview you're about to see with Gabriela and how she's helped thousands of couples get pregnant. And you never know, because she has a free program. I think it's called Fertility Challenge. And you never know if that little kid is here because of Gabriela. So this is an incredible interview, a lot of information, but at the heart and soul of it, it's about family. It's about, it's about people following their dreams of having a family. So here's a little more of the music, and then over to Gabriela. Welcome to Intimate Conversations, Season 13, Heart Broken Open, where intimacy is an inside job. Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to another episode of Intimate Conversations. Here we are, Season 13, Heart Broken Open, with a wonderful guest, Gabriela Rosa. She has the sexiest accent, but I'm just going to leave that as a little teaser foreshadowing until we hear her. I'll first explain who this incredible woman is. She's a fertility specialist, reproductive health educator, and Harvard University awarded scholar, wow, and accomplished and experienced business leader and entrepreneur. And Gabriela, my son's name is Gabriel, by the way, Gabriela created the world's first entirely virtual and holistic fertility clinic. Wow. As the founder and CEO of the Rosa Institute, which currently serves patients in every continent other than Antarctica and the penguins there, Gabriela leads a team of holistic specialists, and her treatment methodology has become an authority in its industry for identifying and addressing biochemical obstacles that guide couples in overcoming infertility and recurrent miscarriage, despite previous reproductive difficulties and failed treatments. Yes. Through various programs, Gabriela and her team have educated over 140,000 couples in more than 110 countries, not companies, 110 countries. Thank you so much for being here today. Welcome.
It's such a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes. And so the accent's Australia. Do you live in Australia?
I do. It's funny because I often get asked, so where are you from? And I'm like, hang on a second. Who am I speaking to? Where am I from? Because I was born in Brazil and I was raised there until my teenage years. And then my parents moved to Australia and lived here for 3 years. I then went to Germany as an exchange student and lived there for a year, came back to Brazil, then went back to Australia, on my own. And I have been living in Australia, and then in the last 3 years, I've been living in Boston. So it's because of, doing my doctorate at Harvard. Yeah. So it's been a very, lived in many places, let's put it that way. I'm sure, there's lots of people that have lived in so many more places, but these days I find that we don't get people living in many different places. And so I often have to ask myself, especially because I still kind of somehow really deeply, even though Australia is my home and I really would, not, my kids are here and, all of that, I still feel very Brazilian, And I think it has something to do with my parents still, they've lived here for a period of time, but then, they're back in Brazil now. And, I always speak in Portuguese with them. And so it's just, I just feel very Brazilian, and I love Brazilian food. So there is no better food than Brazilian food, except I will say, just between you and me, is a little bit of a secret. Probably Mexican food is better than Brazilian food, but I will not really say that I said that.
No.
Even though it's not public.
I just moved to Santa Fe, and oh my goodness, the authentic Mexican here. Oh, I'm a very lucky lady.
I know. It's
Yeah.
incredible. Like, honestly, when I go to Mexico, I've been to Mexico now 3 or 4 times, and, with locals, which is great.
Yes.
And it is just, oh my God, I could live in Mexico for the
Oh,
food. It's just
100%.
like,
100%. 100%. And then I'm even looking above your head. I went to Egypt the first time when I was 13 and I see papyrus above your head.
yes,
So
yeah.
you've also been there, obviously, and
Well,
traveled.
actually,
Is that a gift?
this is actually from a gift from a friend who is Egyptian. So
Oh,
yeah, no, that was not from my travels. Although I do have to say, I really want to go to Egypt. That's one place that I have not been. Even though I've traveled extensively, I haven't been there, and I really want to. It's definitely a place on my bucket list.
oh, I encourage it. I was blessed to go. I was there November 11th, and we were inside the king's chamber, inside the center of the pyramid at 1:11 at night. It was this whole like spiritual ceremony and traveled all around. So I went there older as an adult, and then I was there when I was young. So traveling, I love. I know this has nothing to do with fertility, but I'm just so fascinated about who you are. So your accent is quite Aussie, but you were
Yes.
raised all the way till teenagehood by Aussies who spoke Portuguese. So where did
No, no, it's so funny. And actually, that's a really interesting thing because I learned to speak English in Australia.
okay.
So the first
Ah,
time that my parents moved here, I was 13 and I went to school here.
got
So,
it.
I
Yeah.
went to 3 years of school here.
Hmm.
And so, I think that it was just that whole brain plasticity, neuroplasticity
Yep. Yep.
situation, when you're young. And
Yeah.
of course, hearing that's what I'm hearing. So,
Yeah.
it just ends up being the way in which you speak. And obviously, lots of people that move to countries to learn languages after a certain age don't
Yeah.
develop the accent. But
Right.
I think I was young enough that it was just like, okay, well, that's how you speak English.
That's right. That's right. Yes. Well, I'm from Canada, and I left when I was 19. And so I think I speak more Americanish, but as soon as you get me around some Canadians, take off a and sorry and all those things will start to come out. But I'm moving into this beautiful conversation around fertility. I have one child. I was on birth control my whole life. I went off it, got pregnant the very first month, and had an easy peasy birth. I've been very, very blessed with that. And I've had clients that it's been so devastating, the
Mm.
infertility or the miscarriages and every process under the sun. And it's a death, a stillbirth or a miscarriage. And I do a lot of work with trauma and integration of traumas. And this, I think, I'm really pleased that we can bring reverence and a depth of
Yeah.
honor to this process. And I'm really grateful. I don't even know why it makes me cry. I'm just really grateful of your integrity of what you do on this planet, and all these different thousands of couples who have a different future because of you. So thank you for who you are and what you do. And why did you choose to follow this path?
That part, how I often read about, in spiritual concepts, how before you're born, and, whether this is true or not, who knows, really. But at the end of the day, the way that I see it is like, you get this life, right?
Yeah.
And some people think it's your only one. Some people think that you've had many and you will have more. But whatever it is that you think, there are certain aspects of life that I somehow feel you have predispositions toward,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And you have this kind of like, you don't really know. Like, I think every person, not every person, I shouldn't generalize like that, but I think most people will have a variety of different paths or avenues they will take in life. And, it could be this, or it could be that, or it could be the other, you
Right.
know. And for me, it was, very much, I remember as a young girl thinking, maybe I'll be an astronaut, maybe I'll be a brain surgeon, maybe I'll be, who knows what I'll be, right? And those ideas, actually, brain surgery, I did consider for a while.
Oh,
Medicine was something that I did consider for a while.
yeah.
And, with the moves and all the things that, I was living in different countries, it kind of didn't pan out that way in the way that the structure of school systems and,
Yeah.
like, because I was moving at kind of critical times where you have to do specific exams for school and all of that.
Yeah.
And then, I was really thinking about, okay, well, what do I want to do? And I had to have a deep conversation with myself about what am I interested in? And
Yeah.
that's where I started, like, what am I interested in? What do I see myself actually exploring in this life? And the things that came up were like interior design. I was interested in medicine, medicine, interior design. And then at one point I had just moved countries again and had to ask myself that question once more.
Mm.
And I was interested in nutrition and kind of the easiest path that presented itself to me was nutrition at the time because of
Okay.
my interest and also kind of how things were leading,
Yeah.
And so I started with doing a course in nutrition, and very quickly, I think within the first 3 months,
Uh-huh.
I was like, I don't think this is going to work out because, like there's only so much you can treat people and do with food and food
Yeah.
alone.
Yeah.
You tell people that they shouldn't eat this or they should eat that, and they don't really listen. So, so very quickly, I was kind of like, yeah, no, that's not a very good, solid intervention in my mind. And I was
Yeah.
very young, so I don't know. It was just a very common sense type, thought.
Yeah.
And so I then, in the place that I was studying, they offered diplomas in naturopathy, naturopathic medicine.
Yeah.
And so I thought, you know what, I'll do that because I think that there's more tools that I'll be
Yeah.
able to access in order
Uh-huh.
to be able to treat people. And they also offered university pathways. And, so I ended up doing a Bachelor of Health Science. And then after I finished that, a few years later, I went on and did a master's in reproductive medicine and human genetics at the University of Sydney. And then some few years after that, I decided that I wanted more adventure and I did a master's in public health at Harvard.
Uh-huh.
And then after that, I was like, the pain hasn't been enough, clearly. Let's go and do a doctorate. And so
Uh,
it's been kind of like this evolving experience, I guess. And, I really did not if I look at myself when I made the decision to go into this work of studying naturopathic medicine, it wasn't a set, clear path. But
mm.
as I was coming out of it and as I was finishing, I had an experience of like, okay, I want to specialize in something. I always knew, for me, I've always been someone who is interested in mastery.
Mm.
Like I wanted to be excellent, not
Yeah.
just okay or very
Yes.
good at something. I really wanted to excel in a particular area. And again, in the same way that I chose to go down the path of naturopathic medicine, I wasn't exactly clear that, reproductive medicine was going to be the thing that I would focus on. But I was working in an obstetrician gynecologist's clinic when I
Uh-huh.
was studying. And so I had that context and that reference.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
was 6 gynecologists in the same rooms. And so it was a really busy, fast kind of tracked place. And my boss at the time, who's still a wonderful mentor, he basically said to me, look, when you graduate, he's a Scottish man, with that beautiful Scottish accent that you
Yeah.
really have to pay attention to
Yeah.
actually understand. But he said, oh, you can practice here. You can just like, when you graduate, you can just practice here. There's a room, just practice here. And I'm like, okay. So that was an interesting kind of beginning because at that point I had already decided that, okay, I really do want to focus on women's health. I want to focus
Yeah.
on, things that are related to fertility. And
Yeah.
so I started practicing there, and actually, some of my first fertility patients came from there. There were
Ah,
people who, in fact, this one lady that I really remember very well, she came to me after recurrent miscarriages,
mm,
and her son actually just a couple of years ago went to the army. And I was
mm.
like, at that point, I was like, oh my God, like I really have gotten old. It has been a
Yeah.
long time. Because I'm like,
Well,
seriously? When your patients' babies are going to the army, it's
yeah.
like, okay, this is for real. They're men,
Yep.
you know?
Yep.
So that was a really interesting experience. But what actually then consolidated that? So I started working in women's health and supporting women's health in particular, with a focus on men as well, because at the very beginning I was already working with couples,
Mm-hmm.
who were having some kind of difficulty. They weren't that, it wasn't as complex as it is today. And that evolved because of patients that I saw, about 10 years into my practicing. I had a lady who was referred by someone who had been experiencing infertility for 10 years
Oof.
and had done multiple failed IVF cycles and lots of things that hadn't worked in that time.
Wow.
And I really I was very skeptical. She
Mm.
really wanted to be treated by me. And she was like, look, I really want to do this. I want to prepare for an IVF cycle. And I'm like, I don't think this is going to be enough, for you to get pregnant. And she goes, no, but don't worry, because I just want to do IVF anyway as a last resort, last time. If it doesn't work, I'm just going to shut this chapter. I'm
Mm.
like, no, okay, we can do that. So anyway, I treated her, and you know, 4 months later, she was pregnant for the first time in her life, naturally with her own eggs. And I was like, and she was over 40 at that point. And I'm like, yeah, okay, that was an interesting coincidence. That's lovely for her. That's great. Didn't think much more of it other than to say, I don't know if that really was the thing that did it. But, good for her. Was happy. Then another lady comes to me a few months later who had been trying for 19 years to conceive, and similar story, had done multiple failed IVF cycles, multiple treatments. By this stage, she was 43, about to turn 44. And I said, look, and she really didn't want to be treated. Her husband dragged her in there. So it was a complicated story. And it
Yeah.
was funny because she was like, okay, fine, I'll do this just as it was one last time, just to shut you up kind of thing,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And so she basically went along with it. Long story short, about 5 months later, she also was pregnant naturally with her own eggs. And at that point, I like it actually piqued my interest. I was like, okay, this is interesting. If it's a second coincidence, it's a lot, but
Yeah.
let's go with this. Let's see what this leads. And so at that point, I made a decision
Yeah.
that I was curious. I was very curious
Yeah.
whether this would help anybody else.
Right.
Like in the same way. And so I started positioning the way in which I presented what I did, with the hope of helping people who had experienced more than 2 years of infertility.
Yeah.
Also, because what ended up happening in treating these two women,
Yeah.
prior to that point, I had been treating women who were 6 months to a year, trying to get pregnant, couples.
Yeah.
But what I noticed, and what I never enjoyed, and to this day, I have no patience for that kind of behavior, is
Uh-huh.
that I'm running out of time. I must go into IVF immediately because I have 5 minutes, to have a baby. And it's like, if that's how you feel, go and do IVF, because that's what you need. Even if it's,
Yeah.
and we know from scientific data, population studies across the world, over 70% of IVF cycles fail.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you really have this, and the majority of people for whom it works first time, which is that live birth, 29% of people who actually will start an IVF cycle and deliver a baby at the end of it, 29% out of 100. It's not a lot,
No.
right?
No.
It's a
No.
tiny amount. And so you got to think, like, is there a way that I can improve those odds? What can I do to enhance my chances? Otherwise, you're just going to be on that kind of like, merry-go-round of failed cycle after failed cycle, which many people are. There was a
Yeah.
wonderful study that was 178,000 cases, cycles of IVF analyzed. And in that study, they demonstrated that on average, in order to have close to an 80% live birth rate,
Yeah.
you needed 8 IVF cycles.
Oh my God.
8.
I mean,
Yeah.
I've coached people that have gone through this. Clearly, I'm not a doctor, but the changes in their body, the
Oh,
emotions,
it's
the
unbelievable.
trauma. It's into 8.
Eight. Now imagine, I don't have to tell you, in the United States, and the average cost of an IVF cycle is $17,000.
Yes, there's that as
So,
well. Thank you very much.
so
Yeah.
exactly. So then you have not only the financial investment, right, which is like a live birth through IVF in the US, and let me pull the data, $67,009.50. According to Katz et al. And, it's like that's $70,000 that you don't need to spend. But anyway, that's a whole other story.
It
So
is, but it's a
anyway,
good
so
story. We ought to put a pin in that there. But yeah, I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan.
you don't
Okay.
know. I'm not a fan either. I mean, people talk about college education being expensive. Try having a baby through IVF, and then let's talk.
Yeah.
But again, that wasn't a part of my radar at the time that I started. Like it really was more about what I noticed about these women that was very different was that they had a level of resignation about whatever was going to happen that brought me as a clinician peace of mind.
Mm.
That it was like, you know what, they might go and do nothing and still have the same result that they have today, or they might do something that at the very least is going to improve their health. So
Right.
I felt very emboldened, I guess, by the fact that if we didn't get a baby, at least we would have a healthy outcome. And I've always been exceedingly transparent. Like
Mm.
that's one thing that people cannot. In fact, I get faulted for how transparent I am, how
I don't think that's a
kind.
fault. I think that's a strength, but it does make people
Yeah,
uncomfortable. Yeah.
no, it does. People in my personal circles, people are like, okay, she's gonna say it how it is, like, like, oof. And I don't know if I'll like to hear that,
Yeah,
but
two of us at a party, best not to be at a lot of parties together because we would like kill the room.
exactly. So it's like, and look, and I refrain from just opening my mouth just for hearing my own voice. But like in a case like when patients come to me,
Yeah.
it's like they're seeking advice about their life,
Yeah.
right? So the
Yeah.
last thing I want is for them to feel either an empty hope that like is never going to eventuate, or a sense of urgency for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
And
Fear.
so yeah, so it's a really important, for me it's very important that if there is room for improvement, if there is room to do something, that we do it. But
Right.
if there isn't, that we get clarity around what is it that is going to best serve the situation. If it's
Yeah.
not this, then what? But with that experience with those two people, what I realized was that I really did not have patience for the under 6 to 12 month target audience because I was like, okay, ladies, if you think you need to go and do the thing that's not going to work, be my guest. That's
Yeah.
the door right there.
Yeah.
Don't, like, there's no need for you to take away my peace of mind
What a
from,
wonderful boundary. That's a great
oh,
boundary
look,
and a real litmus test because I wanted to, as we go on this conversation, because I'm clearly not a doctor, but I've worked with people that, and I can't take credit for this, but isn't it interesting the cancer didn't come back? Isn't it interesting that they got pregnant? Isn't it interesting that they,
yeah,
because
yeah,
the energy of emotion or unintegrated emotions or the power of fear to push away that which we desire or attachment, it's
yes,
very powerful. So I love that
yeah,
this was you can walk through the door, you
yeah,
can just
yeah.
chill out. This is great. Yeah.
Yeah,
Please
exactly.
continue.
And so then what ended up happening was I noticed a very big distinction between, somebody who was in that desperate mode
Yeah.
and somebody who was just like, you know what, this hasn't worked for 10 years.
Right.
I don't think it's going to work anyway. but for the hell of it, let's
Sure.
give it a go, you know?
Yep. Yep. Let's just go on, which is very similar to me. Let's just go on Match.com and see what happens. You know,
You know,
I'm
and
totally
see
fine
how
if I'm
those
single the rest of my life. Yeah. Yep.
exactly. And so, the funniest part was, with the second lady, because the second lady, she was very averse. Like the first one convinced, like she literally had to convince me to treat her. The second one was like, "Ah, can we just
Get
get
him to
this over
shut
and
up.
done with quickly?" Exactly. Like the quicker we like go through this, the better.
Yeah.
Let's just like round this up. And I'm like,
Zero
okay,
attachment.
she had zero attachment. But what was amazing about that woman is that the same time that she had zero attachment, she was like fully, like when she was on board, she
Yeah.
was fully there. And she was like, so basically I would tell her, look, you need to do this and this and this, and this is what you need to do, and this is what we're aiming for. And this is essentially what we need to, these are the outcomes, these are milestones, these are the outcomes, let's go. And she was like there. So
Nice.
one day I hadn't seen her for 6 weeks, and I usually see my patients quite regularly, and I hadn't seen her in 6 weeks, and I always follow up. Like if they've kind of got lost somewhere, I'm like,
Yeah.
come back
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
Even if it's to tell me I've given up, I decided that I don't want to try anymore, whatever it is,
Sure.
we're going to have that conversation.
Right. You're gonna
Like
complete the
I
loop.
really, exactly, that closure is very
Yep.
important.
Yep.
So I very much stay very close to my patients in that way. And so there's my team. And so I call her and she's like, and I said, what's happened? I haven't seen you. You haven't messaged. You haven't told me. I'm the girlfriend that's like, how dare you? But anyway, so funny. So she then goes, yeah, no, look, I was feeling really great and everything was going really well. And then like I got, my cycles became irregular again and I just haven't been feeling well. I've had like a flu for the last month. And, I just have been feeling really like just unwell, nauseous, tired, fatigued. I'm like, hang on a second.
Sounds like you're pregnant.
Have you had a pregnancy test? She literally, and this is on the phone, and I will always remember this moment. She goes, ridiculous, Gabriela. I'm not pregnant. I'm like, so little G, her name was, starting with G. I said, like, okay, lovely lady, let's just say you have been doing fertility treatment for the last several months and you're feeling all of these things, which incidentally sound very much like pregnancy symptoms. And you're telling me that I'm ridiculous. Like, let's just revise this conversation, right?
Yeah.
And so she goes, so I said to her, I said, listen, today, you are going to the pharmacy, getting a pregnancy test and taking it because we need to know what's going on here. And she goes, oh, no, I don't want to. I said, listen, this is like I'm talking to a child. This is not a question, like you just need to go do this thing. And she goes, okay, fine. So then, and I said, I will call you tomorrow so that you can tell me. And actually, you call me. As soon as you had done, you call me. And if you haven't called me, I will call you. And she knew that I would. So anyway, next day, I'm calling her because she hadn't called me. I'm like, what is going on? Like, you told me you were going to go. What happened? Oh, I got there and all the kids from our school, she worked in a very, like a very fancy private school. So all the kids from our school were in the pharmacy. I couldn't go in there. I'm like, okay, fine, fair enough. Send your husband. So anyway, the husband went, got the pregnancy test. She got 3 pregnancy tests. She tested. The first one was positive. The other 2 were negative. And so she's telling me, like, she's like, I told you it was going to be negative. I said, really? She goes, yeah, one was positive, but obviously it was broken. I'm like, okay, so it's just hang up. That means it's positive. So, you really do need to, like, we need to go and have an ultrasound. You're definitely pregnant. You need a blood test, you need an ultrasound.
Yeah.
So anyway, we went, got all of these things done. 15 weeks pregnant. Of course, the pregnancy tests were going to be inconclusive. After, like when you're pregnant to a certain stage, like the HCG is so high, the test doesn't know what to do with it. And so basically this way, in fact, it goes down at a certain time in pregnancy. So anyway, long story short, this woman was so pregnant and she was like, what? So the funniest part of this whole conversation was her then calling me back and going, yeah, I'm like, really pregnant. I'm like, yeah, you really are. So long story, she had a beautiful baby girl and that was a really big turning point in my career because I realized at that point that, okay, maybe this isn't a fluke. And it was then in, that whole reframing for me of like, okay, people who have already given up or who are on the brink of giving up, who really think that there's nothing else for them to do, those are my people. So I've
Totally.
started literally marketing in that way. It's like, if you've done all of these things that haven't worked, et cetera, et cetera. So
Right.
that was some years went by, and those are the people that I was attracting, and we were getting babies, and we were getting babies in situations that, like, literally it was like 20 failed IVF cycles. In my book, Fertility Breakthrough, I tell the story of a couple who went through 20, and this book is available free on YouTube and Spotify. Fertility
Oh,
Breakthrough, Overcoming Infertility and Recurrent Miscarriage When Other Treatments Have Failed is the name. But
thank you.
the funny thing about what happened with this lady, that she had been trying for 20 different, like initiated cycles of IVF. So it wasn't just transfers. It was
Oh,
literally 20 failed cycles.
God.
Yeah. And when she came to me, she was really like, okay, we need a break. And I'm like thinking, gosh, it took you a while to decide that you needed a break. 20 cycles is a lot of cycles to, go through. And she goes, yeah, we need a break. I don't know if this is working. I'm like, it's not. Um,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
at the same time, they had never conceived naturally, and they had one child that was conceived after the third cycle of IVF. So they
Oh,
thought, let's just keep going. So long story short, they came to me, and I treated them, and also, like, the funniest part about that couple was that she really didn't believe that she could conceive naturally, and I did, because I had seen by then so many similar stories,
yeah. Yeah.
and so I told her, I said, listen, give yourself at least 3 cycles. And she was in her 40s, and she was kind of like thinking that she was running out of time. I said, give yourself 3 cycles of natural conception attempts, and then if that doesn't work, then we know that we've prepared you to have IVF work in a better way. And so she was like, nah, I don't think so. So I was like, okay, fine. What, I'm just here to guide people. They have to make their own choices and decisions. And also it has to be things that people can live with.
Mm,
Like
mm,
the stories in their minds that they feel they can live with telling themselves when
yeah.
they're
Yeah.
90,
Yeah.
sitting on their
Yeah.
rocking chair.
Yeah.
So I don't meddle in people's decisions.
Mm,
I help them to see what are the pros, what are the cons, and what do they want to do. But this couple was not having anything other than going down the IVF path again. So they did the IVF cycle. They got one embryo, one or two embryos. It was very low response compared to what they had gotten before. But that embryo wasn't ready to be transferred because her lining wasn't ready at the end of the cycle. And so they froze the embryo, and went through the cycle, and they had to wait to get a period and then wait another cycle for the lining to get back to a place where it could, hold a pregnancy. And then they were going to go and transfer again. So she got her period, and she was, in her waiting cycle before she went and did IVF. And of course, they had intercourse mid-cycle, that cycle, and got pregnant naturally whilst waiting to go and have their transfer. And so I was like, I see that positive pregnancy test on my desk, at the time when we used to have paper results. They used to
yeah.
come in the mail.
Yeah.
And I look at that and I'm like, oh, positive pregnancy test. That's exciting. Go and have a look at the name. I'm like, pick up the phone. Like, because I could not wait to be the person to say, I told
Do
you.
so.
I had
Gabriella,
to be that person.
you just mentioned briefly, but thank you for your generosity that you've written a book and it's available complimentary on YouTube and Spotify. What is it that you're doing with these people that is helping them to have these natural births? So I understand the emotions of it. If you're super attached, you're going to, push away that which you desire. That energetically makes a lot of sense to me. A certain level of resignation. So fine, I'll just give it a go. I can see all of that. But what is it that you think? Is it mostly emotional? Is it mostly nutritional? Is it mostly understanding your body? Like, what is it that so many
You
thousands
know,
of women
yeah.
and couples are missing?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's actually simpler than it appears when you figure it out.
Yeah, I
And
sense
I
it.
think that yeah, and I think that that's the part where most people overlook. And I think that there is a tendency towards overlooking because it's the way in which the healthcare system is structured. And so, let me put it to you this way. When was the last time you solved the problem you didn't know you had?
Yeah, you can't. Yeah,
Right?
you don't.
It's like you literally keep going around in circles. You
Yeah,
literally, if you don't understand the problem, you are very far from a solution.
totally.
Because unless you get extremely lucky, and then of course it's not reproducible. Because when you get lucky and you don't know what
Look,
worked,
you don't know
guess
what
what?
caused it.
You
Hmm.
can't do it again,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
You then hope for the same similar kind of situations that make you lucky so that you can, and, in that you can lose years. And so, really, what has happened is that since the very beginning, I started to put together a framework of like, it was almost, I read Atu Gawande's book, The Checklist Manifesto. So he's a Harvard professor. And I read his book way before I got into Harvard. And it was really interesting because he was a surgeon and he was the first person who, through scientific evidence, demonstrated that operating rooms, ER,
Yep.
emergency rooms, operating rooms, did better when there was a simple checklist that the entire staff followed
Hmm.
before the surgery, like
Okay.
wash your hands, put gloves on,
Okay.
gown, make sure you have all of these things at hand, make sure, like literally that simple, right?
Yeah.
And I read that book and I was like, wow, this is fascinating. What if I created one such checklist for my patients,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that's what I started to do. I literally was like, okay, what are the checklist items that need to go? And of course, that checklist grew into thousands of items that then got grouped into categories, that then got grouped into steps, that then got grouped into what is now known as the fertile method, right? And so it literally was a development from that place of like, okay, I need a systematic approach to know that I haven't missed anything,
Yeah.
and so that's how this whole thing began.
Hmm.
And I was then able to kind of, I guess, for lack of a better word, really kind of construct a process
Yeah.
that could be
Right.
reproduced by
With
me
all
or
of
by anybody else.
with your
So it was
specialists on your team. Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So it was a methodology that I developed as a result of the experience that I was having with the patients that I was treating. And now obviously my team utilizes the method and the whole process. And I have many requests for training. We don't train people in this method, not yet. Anyway, who knows? Maybe one day. But it's really not something that is there for that purpose. It's really my greatest aim, and I often joke about the fact that give me another 50 years, and who knows? Maybe I'll make some headway toward it. Is that the public health interventions that we now run. So there's a free program called the Fertility Challenge that I run,
Uh-huh.
which is very much about educating people about what are the things that they can do.
Yeah.
Again, every program, everything that I do in the Rosa Institute, follows and is underpinned by the fertile method. It's about
Hmm.
ensuring that we fact find, first of all, and this is one of the biggest pieces, is that proper diagnostics is not part of mainstream standard healthcare system.
Got it.
Because what happens is, in the majority of cases in the general population, within 2 years, 93.6% of people will have had their baby
Mm.
or would have been pregnant by that point of
Okay.
trying.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so basically what happens is it's the remaining 6 point whatever percent
Right.
that essentially are struggling to conceive.
Yeah.
And so what happens is, if you have a situation in public health where treating and preventing is going to cost the same, treatment is the only way that you're going to go about it. It's not going to be prevention, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why there's a lot of, interventions and programs and things that don't move forward with funding, because at the end of the day, guess what? If treating and preventing is going to cost the same, we're just going to save the money on prevention and we're just going to move forward with treatment.
Yeah.
And in infertility, there isn't a lot of budget for couples who are struggling, because guess what? Almost 94% are going to conceive
Don't
within
need it.
3 years, and
Yeah.
over 96% within 3 years. You
Okay.
see? And so the way that it's envisioned is that, well, there's going to be enough babies eventually anyway. And the majority of times and places where we're seeing population decline in terms of fertility rates is really typically because of choice, as opposed to it being an infertility, epidemic, so to speak. Infertility rates, from a perspective, infertility rates, not fertility rates. Fertility rates relate to how many, how people are having babies.
Yeah.
Infertility rates, which is how much infertility there is in the population, it has remained pretty stable. Even though we have seen that male fertility, sperm counts have declined substantially over time.
Yeah.
The thinking around this is that, yes, it's getting worse and worse and it's getting more and more difficult, but at the same time, it's still enough for most people to conceive naturally. Now, it's not to say that that's good. That's not to say that it's positive. That's not to say that it's actually how it should be. In fact, it's not how it should be. And then the data is very clear on this. There are studies that show that when you have an infertility diagnosis that doesn't get addressed, the risk down the track of cancer, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, it increases in men by almost 50%. Right,
so
from an infertility diagnosis. So there is a correlation between not being healthy enough to be able to get pregnant or affect a pregnancy, and all the obstacles and reasons as to why that's not happening, and disease that increases the risk of all-cause mortality down the track. And, in women, it's 36% of women are going to have an increased risk of cardiovascular disease when they have an infertility diagnosis and or experience pregnancy loss that gets unaddressed. And that makes sense, because basically, if you think about it, antiphospholipid syndrome is one of the causes of recurrent miscarriage. It's also one of the causes of increased risk of stroke and other forms of heart disease.
I'm sorry, what does that mean, what you just said? What is that?
Antiphospholipid syndrome. So basically, it's basically phospholipids they increase clotting in the blood. That clotting is going to increase the risk of miscarriage, but it's also going to increase the risk of stroke and heart disease, you see. And so basically what ends up happening is that if you don't, identify that you have this problem when you are experiencing recurrent miscarriage, you may identify it after you've had a stroke.
Yeah, exactly, right? Wow.
So it's like, do we just leave it alone? Do we just believe that it's a numbers game, that we should just keep trying? Do we just, I don't think that's the path. Because the reality is that if somebody is having difficulty conceiving, difficulty carrying a pregnancy to term, which incidentally are extremely related, however, the solution that the healthcare system provides is a terrible one. If you're having recurrent miscarriage, very seldom it's because of chromosomal abnormalities. The majority of the reason is actually everything else that could cause that, which, antiphospholipid syndrome, there's lots of thrombophilias, and lots of different reasons, right?
Wow.
But the reality of it is that, and in fact, with miscarriages, I've kind of identified 9 different category reasons for miscarriage. So what ends up happening is that in every healthcare system, miscarriages don't get identified until you've had at least 3. But the thing about that is that most people who have been, quote unquote, infertile for many years actually are suffering implantation failure and early miscarriage. It's the same thing that happens when a couple has multiple embryos that are transferred after IVF treatment.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
at the time of transfer, you're pregnant. Make no mistake about it. You are
Yeah.
absolutely pregnant. You had an embryo that was viable and live,
Yeah.
and you were pregnant at that time. If you haven't seen a positive pregnancy test, it's not simply a matter of a quote unquote failed cycle. That's a miscarriage early, but a miscarriage nonetheless. And
Wow.
so we've got to start thinking about fertility in those terms. It's like we need to first identify what are the issues that are getting in the way. How do we address it? And going back to public health interventions, it's that whole thing of like, and this is why I say, give me another 50 years, because I really envision a time where couples are not herded down the IVF kind of,
Yeah. Thank you.
path
Yeah.
as the only option
Yeah.
for addressing these issues. Because as I know and have now spent, over 2.5 decades working on this problem, I know that so many people would be better served by interventions that support health, that
Yes.
support optimizing what their body is doing through
Yeah.
not only lifestyle, but also understanding more about what is happening with their biology, their biochemistry, and what are the simple interventions and simple things that can improve that. And that's why I put together the Fertility Challenge, which we make available free of charge for people all over the world, because I know some people, we've had people in Africa, in like everywhere around the world come into this program and learn about, one, how to be healthier, and
Yes.
how to manage their emotions, manage what's going on for them on a physical, emotional, and mental level,
Yeah.
as well as be able to actually put simple interventions together that is available to anybody to improve their health.
Right.
And I really believe that that's it's a extremely important part of what needs to happen for people to be able to have better results, reproductive results, but also long-term health and quality of life.
Completely.
So and what I do differently is really that, is actually paying attention, figuring out what are the issues that are getting in the way, addressing them in a personalized way, and we get more and more precise. I mean, the confluence these days of technology, medicine, and, knowledge is incredible. And so we have been able over the years to get more and more precise, so that unexplained infertility is like the worst BS diagnosis that I've ever heard. It literally is like, well, we haven't really kind of been bothered to figure out what's actually getting in the way. So just, you're not getting pregnant.
Ugh.
Unexplained,
No.
or the same with miscarriage. And I'm like, no. I'm the kind of person, like, I need to know. Even if it's just to know that, okay, actually, I don't want to do the work that is required to change that, but at least I know that it wasn't because I didn't have a choice, or I didn't try, or some other obscure reason. Because I think it's so relevant for a person to go, you know what, I've had X number of cycles. I've decided I no longer want a baby like I did before, and I actually don't want to keep trying. Great. It's a choice. It's a decision that somebody made because they decide. Like, it's the same as me. If somebody was to say to me today, like, do you want to go and have a baby? I'm like, no, thank you. I'm okay with that. I'm really good with sleeping all the way through the night, with, going out whenever I want, and knowing that there's no crying baby waiting for me at home, having my boobs be, full of milk, like some kind of like, I'm good. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm done.
Now, exactly. And when you're done, the thing about it, it's very interesting how people often, when they've had a very convoluted, very, very challenging journey, how they ask often the question of like, oh, I'm not sure. How do I know if I'm done? If you're asking the question, you're not done.
You're not done, yeah.
That's the way you know. Because when you are done, you are like, thank you very much. Hell no.
Yeah, that ship sailed. That ship sailed. What I love, so first I want to get all the details, people that are listening who are like, okay, how can I learn more? So fertility, breakthrough.com. And that's also where they can find this fertility challenge or the fertility
Yes.
book. All the resources are
Yes,
there. Okay.
absolutely. So all the resources they will find through the website, just
Super
scroll
good. And your
through it.
team of the
It's there.
holistic specialists, like everybody, don't you worry one little bit. It'll be in the show notes, but fertilitybreakthrough.com. Perfect. Second thing I want to say, and we're going to dance on Patreon in a little bit too, and have some girlfriend. What I really appreciate, and that's similar about our approaches, which I love, and I'm so sure that's why my staff booked you on our show, is that when people come to me with relationship issues, they've been on SSRIs for 20 years. They've been through 3 divorces. They've been through domestic violence. They've been through so many things. And I don't do the same sort of, checklist as you do, but it's like back to the basics. Are they in their body? Are they so traumatized that they've disassociated? They're not even in there. Do they understand that worth and accomplishments aren't the same thing? Right? Do they understand that men come and go, the size of your ass comes and goes, like these come, but your worth is inherent. So there's those are just a few of the fundamental lessons that their parents did their best, but never taught them to understand that they belong and that they matter and that their worth is from the inside out and they're not better once they find a partner. All of these really fundamental things that cause emotions that are uncomfortable, that they medicate or they seek even harder for the relationship and they'll settle, like all the negative problems that will happen, or they'll stay in an abusive relationship, etc. By the time they get to you, by the time they get to me, the system hasn't taught them these fundamental things. So I so relate in my own world and I so respect what you're providing for people. And I believe we came to the planet when we did because the old systems and structures are done. They don't work. And I'm so grateful that you're creating a new way through these fundamental education and these checklists and supporting so many couples. And may this be the new way. May the old system, bless it, thank you, but may it fall. And may this be a new way. And may also the way that I support people in having this intimacy with themselves, intimacy with listening to their body, oneness with spirit, however you want to say it. This healthy relationship with self allows you to have healthy relationship with your baby, with your partner, with the divine, with your body, etc. So I've got some juicy questions to ask you over on Patreon. But before we end, one more time, fertilitybreakthrough.com. How would you like to complete this amazing conversation from your beautiful heart and your feisty spirit and your desire for excellence, all these wonderful qualities about you? How would you like to complete this conversation?
I think that, people need to be kinder to themselves. I think that that's one really important piece that often is missed, especially when things haven't been straightforward or haven't been easy. Pema Chodron, the Buddhist teacher, says, and in fact, I love the quote so much that I put it as the very first thing that people see in Fertility Breakthrough, is that nothing ever goes away until it teaches us what we need to know.
Oh,
And it's to me it's so profound, because the way I see the fertility journey, or the infertility journey for some, is really about growth, and I see it as very much a dance, between what is and what we're wanting to create, and the fact that it's possible to transmute it. It's possible to change it. And that's the message that I really want to leave people with, is that it may be that is your cross, so to speak. That's your thing, right? That you need to overcome. For other people, it's other things, like my dad, he never had infertility, but he had colorectal cancer and, a brain tumor removed and a quadruple heart bypass in the same year after having had liver and lung and whatever else. Wow. That's his thing. Like, that was the lesson that came to teach him more about him and his inner source and his inner being. And in that, to be honest, like, he's been such an incredibly inspiring example to everyone who knows him, of determination and positivity through what is immense chaos
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
uncertainty. And every time that he'll go into one of these like surgeries that the doctors are going like, I don't know if you're going to come out of this, he just like takes a little moment and then just springs out of it
Mm,
completely like as if nothing had happened. And I'm like, wow, if
mm.
my dad can go through that and do that,
Yes.
I can do anything, you
Yeah.
know. So sometimes our own challenges are there to teach not only us, but those around us
Yeah. That's
how
possible.
to rise to the occasion, you
Mm,
know. And
mm,
so, what I encourage and what I wish for people is that they show themselves how they will rise to the occasion,
mm,
because that is what the journey, the lesson is there to teach us, is how
mm.
to navigate the really truly difficult things in our lives with dignity, with self-respect, with
Yes.
love, you know,
Yes.
in a way that we come out the other side knowing that, you know what, I've given it my best. I've given
Yeah.
it my very best. And
Mm.
that is all that is required.
Yeah. Wow. Beautifully said. Beautifully said. I'm seeing this image of like holding one's heart soft in the front of our body and our spine being this like redwood tree, having our own back and being able to walk through the world with that heart open, knowing you have done your best. Beautifully
Yeah.
said. Beautifully
Yeah.
said. Okay, there's a little bit more over on Patreon. So thank you all for being with us on
Yeah.
this very informative, very inspiring, and very heartfelt conversation about fertility and infertility. Fertilitybreakthrough.com, the amazing Gabriela Rosa. So we will see you over on Patreon. And thank you again for being with us on Intimate Conversations. See you next week on Intimate Conversations. Get out there and make love to life. Okay, I just danced to Rock Lobster. I friggin' love that song, Rock Lobster. So I finished flamenco dancing, and then I came and I met a friend that I met the first couple of weeks I moved here. She works at this really beautiful jewelry store. So I went to go see her. And then I missed ABBA Revival. So I was a little upset by that. But then as soon as I got out of here, they started playing Rock Lobster. So I just got right to the front and had so much fun. And it really kind of reminds me, I hope you got to check out the Patreon with Gabriela. We danced, we had some fun. I have fun with everybody dancing at the end on after the show. But it was really, really great. She's been interviewed like a gazillion times, right? But no one had ever asked her to dance. So that was great to be a first. And it's like every time I see kids, sometimes I'm getting like these grandmother pangs, I suppose you could say, like I miss little ones around. But I swear, every time I see a family or somebody pregnant, I have this newfound appreciation that it's not always easy. I mean, as I shared on the podcast, I got pregnant on my very first try, so I was very, very blessed, but a lot of people aren't. And I've had a lot of clients helping them integrate the trauma of losing a baby or miscarriage, etc. And so I really feel so, don't want to get hit by a car. I really deeply feel grateful for what Gabriela does in this world. And also our alignment on, if you remember the podcast, when you're really, really attached to something, you hang on so hard that you push it away. And so whether that's pregnancy or finding the love of your life, or even just like, for me, just moving to Santa Fe, I'm unattached. If it works out, great. If it doesn't, I'm going to enjoy the time when I'm here. So what a wonderful life I have interviewing the coolest people on Intimate Conversations. So please follow Gabriela. Please, she has her fertility challenge that is completely complimentary. Watching cars, thank you so much. So if you're trying to get pregnant, getting ready to get pregnant, but her ideal clients are ones that they've almost given up. So they're not attached and they're almost resigned, and she often is their last hope.
and they get pregnant. So that could be you. And yeah, even though, oh, here I go crying again, even though I haven't seen my son in over 5 years, oh my God, the feeling of him in my belly. I was really blessed with an easy birth and savoring the first 15 years of being together. Friggin' love being a mother. So if you have that desire in you, Gabriela is a resource that can support you in having an overall healthier life and most certainly success with fertility. All right. I love you. I love you. Thanks for being with us on Intimate Conversations.